We've stress tested the Plas-1 Scorcher and the SG-8S Slugger, both very high tier, very expensive weapons. In both tests, I turned up things I really didn't expect. Like most people, my assumption was that the Breaker shotgun was meta and everything else was just various shades of trash. After spending serious time with these weapons, I'm happy to say that I was wrong. So today, we're going to do the test of tests. We'll be putting the two most popular permutations of the Breaker shotgun under the microscope, both the vanilla Breaker and the Breaker Incendiary, so it's a 2-for-1 deal. The results will likely surprise you, as they did me. What won't surprise you is why we're not featuring the Breaker Spray and Pray edition in this test. The reason, of course, is that this video would end in 5 seconds as I tell you, it sucks. For everything. Never use it. Alright, with that review out of the way, we'll be testing the Breaker and Breaker Incendiary against an array of enemy units, both Terminid and Automaton. The Automaton test will be the last third of the video and constitutes 50% of the Helldivers experience, so make sure to stick around for it. I would argue that you'll be spending more of your time in the endgame fighting the bots because they're a little more interesting than kiting endless hordes of bugs, so you want to make sure these guns can perform against the bots too. The SG-225 Breaker is a fully automatic shotgun with a high rate of fire, excellent for controlling crowds. It requires frequent reloading, though one might ask, does anything require more reloading than the Scorcher?
Mag's empty! Mag's empty! Mag's empty!
Breaker is light armor penetrating, with a damage of 330, capacity of 16, recoil of 30, and fire rate of 300. Its reload menu reveals the ability to switch from default auto mode, where you hold down fire to shoot rapidly, to semi mode, where it becomes single shot. You can also switch the flashlight to always on, always off, or the default automatic mode. The SG-225IE Breaker Incendiary is a modified Breaker shotgun, firing incendiary projectiles. It generates heat during use, so it's limited to burst fire. It's light armor penetrating, incendiary, has a damage output of 180, a very impressive capacity of 25, recoil of 28, and a fire rate of 300. The Breaker Incendiary defaults to burst mode. That is, holding down fire will shoot 3 times in rapid succession, after which you'll need to press again. You can switch it to semi mode, which will turn it into a single shot weapon. Like the regular Breaker, it can also switch its flashlight to always on, always off, or automatic. With the stats and menus out of the way, let's see how these guns actually perform against the bugs. Because both of them are traditional shotguns, they launch pellets which spray in a broad area. This means that our number of shots to neutralize a given target is going to vary wildly depending on what distance you engage at. I would suggest keeping all your engagements with the Breaker within 30 meters and the Breaker Incendiary within 20 meters for maximum damage. Anything further and you're really just spraying and praying. Though it should be noted that the regular Breaker is far more effective at mid-distances than the Breaker Incendiary due to its tighter spread. I'm happy to report that both guns can one-shot all Terminid light units if engaged closely enough. That is, the Scavengers, Pouncers, and Hunters. In the case of the Breaker Incendiary, it may be more difficult to tell because while your initial burst may not down the unit, setting them alight causes damage over time, which may eventually whittle them down. Among the rank and file, the Breaker beheads warriors in a single shot. Combined with its relatively tight spread and automatic fire, it's an absolute warrior beheading machine. Just mind your ammo. The Breaker Incendiary will behead a warrior in a 3-round burst at relatively close distance. Bear in mind that they're likely close enough to run after you and get off 1 or 2 nice swings at that distance before they go down. Both guns are not fantastic against hive guards. Their pellets can't penetrate the frontal armor, so you're mostly hoping to shoot into the nooks and crannies of exposed flesh. The Incendiary Breaker has a slight edge here as it's able to set hive guards alight and melt them down over time. For the imposing Brood Commander, the standard Breaker can behead them in as little as 2 shots if the pellets land right. The Incendiary, meanwhile, is a lot more hit and miss. Quite literally. You'll be blasting away at them for a while, and that gives the Brood Commanders a good chance to get some proper swings in. If you're lucky, 2 bursts will take out their head. When you finally succeed, you'll have an animated flaming bug carcass charging at you, which is only mildly terrifying. What's not terrifying at all is how excited I am to compare these guns to the newcomers we have in this month's War Bonds trees. This drop will be happening soon, so make sure you're subscribed not to miss it. Less than 1% of our viewers are subbed, so you guys are constantly missing the notifications on these reviews. When fighting nursing and bile spewers, things get a lot more variable. With the Breaker Incendiary, your best bet is to shoot their bile sac, but even that will take several hits to explode. The regular Breaker is much more capable of shooting their face effectively before they're able to spew bile on you, but even that can be tricky, taking up to half of your mag. The Breaker Incendiary is by far the primary I've used most across my nearly 250 hours of playtime, and I got into this habit of switching to the railgun for hive guards, bile spewers, stalkers, and brood commanders simply because of ammo efficiency. I could never guarantee I'd down the spewers before they were able to melt me, so this method became more predictable. Both guns are able to take down charges very well using the stripped leg armor technique. The regular Breaker has the edge here as it's able to land more of its pellets in a smaller area, leading to anywhere between 2 to 5 shots taking down the charger. The Breaker Incendiary, meanwhile, can take 2 or more bursts to get the job done. For Bile Titans, it goes without saying that engaging them with either Breaker should be considered a last resort. Stick to your airstrikes, sentries, and heavy weapons if you can. Both guns are absolutely amazing for doing firing retreats because you're able to spray and pray, unloading your magazines extremely quickly across a broad area. This means that you can spread out your damage over the entire horde chasing you very efficiently. While I do like the vanilla Breaker, there are a number of factors that give the Breaker Incendiary the advantage when it comes to facing down Terminids, especially at difficulties 7 to 9. The first is the most obvious. It has almost twice the mag capacity. This means you can put out more damage over time in a broader area before needing to reload, which can absolutely be the difference between life or death when the horde arrives. It's also better as a utility weapon for clearing eggs. And finally, it sets stuff on fire. I mean, that's cool as f***. The vanilla Breaker is very usable, but I can't get past the feeling that I'm always reloading it or always running through my ammo pool. It's much like the Scorcher in that way, where it's extremely easy to chew through your mags. In the end, it comes down to personal preference, but both of these guns are the meta for Terminids for a very clear reason. The only gun I would say competes is the Slugger, and that's more for specific medium armor target purposes. The skill ceiling on it is way higher, and while it can obliterate the armored units in a way the Breakers can only dream of, it falls on its face when it comes to horde control. Onto the bots. This is where things change a bit. I'll start with the Incendiary Breaker because this is going to be super short. I once took the Breaker Incendiary on a level 9 Helldive against the automatons by accident. I never made that mistake again. I tried to stop the flare man, but the gun does nothing.
Yeah, once I saw it.
To say that the Breaker Incendiary is useless against the automatons is to give a really bad rap to useless things. It makes HR departments seem like they have a purpose. It makes Anita Sarkeesian seem like a net positive to humanity. I suppose it was kind of okay at taking out the foot soldier units from extremely close range. Beyond that, its best use was setting the robots on fire and making them look even more terrifying to my team. Damage? Not so much. The Breaker Incendiary against robots is a bit like what the Breaker Spray and Pray is like against everything. A complete waste of time. Fortunately, the regular Breaker can actually be used against automatons. Not particularly well. I wouldn't say it's my first choice, or even my second, but it can be used. It does an okay job against foot soldier units from close range and can do well storming outposts on foot. Against Devastators, using the Breaker is an amazing way to get deleted. Unlike the Slugger and Scorcher, there is no stagger being caused here, meaning the moment they lock onto you, you're done. The Breaker isn't able to group its pellets tightly enough to melt Devastators with headshots, so you're relying on sheer attrition. If you're within shotgunning range of a Devastator, you're probably going to be needing a reinforcement pretty soon anyway. For Berserkers, it tends to be fine, as they have to close in to attack, at which point you can really shred them. For Hulks, tanks, and turrets, like most light armor penetrating primaries, you're going to have to blast those exposed vents on the rear to have any chance. But the Breaker would be far from my first choice for those engagements. Both the Slugger and Scorcher obliterate the Breaker shotguns for automaton missions. It's not even close in my perspective after having stress tested all of them. The only caveat is that the Slugger and Scorcher have a higher skill buy-in, which might make them more awkward to use for the gamepad control schema. This could be an unknown bias toward PC on my part because the shotguns are far easier to spray and pray with. All things being equal, however, none of the breaker shotguns are my pick for automaton loadouts. For Terminids, both the vanilla and the incendiary totally slay, so pick your fave and go to town. And there it is, our review of the mighty meta breakers. What do you think? Agree? Disagree? I'm sure you'll let me know either way, and I'll see you when we review those upcoming War Bonds weapons shortly.